Hello and welcome to the Raw Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, to look ahead to tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, gents, we are here to preview tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw, one which will see Brock Lesnar return with the WWE Championship on his shoulder. What do you think of that decision, and how do you see tonight's show going with that?
Well, as we sort of discussed in the SmackDown preview, it's not going to pop a rating, so Raw can't hope for numbers off getting Brock. But I do actually quite like this. In the short term, it brings a top belt to Raw that isn't over the shoulder of Seth Rollins, a champion that I think like the show desperately needs to kind of weigh everything down with a bit more gravitas than whatever the hell Seth's been doing the last few months. And I'm really into the Rey storyline. I'm willing to buy into the idea that Brock Lesnar flew home like without any of his colleagues because he was that desperate to get to Rey Mysterio because he took a beating with a chair. Now Rey was probably still in a hotel in Saudi Arabia. Should have stuck around. But like in kayfabe terms, I think they've done a brilliant job, unfortunately making a victim out of Cain Velasquez, of selling me one more round of Brock and Rey.
Yeah, I can't wait for Brock versus Rey. I think the size differential looks ridiculous on paper, but Rey is an absolute master of his craft. I think we're potentially in for an all-timer, David versus Goliath. It's a storyline explanation for why there are no longer two belts on one brand. I think this is quite passable, and ultimately the ends will justify the means, because if allowed to live up to its potential, that match could be fire.
We mentioned this before when we spoke about Brock and smaller performers, let's just say, your Finn Balor's, your Daniel Bryan's, your AJ Styles of this world. Do you think that will be an element of this storyline again that they will rely upon? And also, looking ahead, obviously we have Survivor Series, but you sense that this may not be on the card. Well, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe you think it is going to be on the card. They're going to just have a WWE Championship match on the card. But if not, the next logical pay-per-view would be TLC, which could work in their favour, I suppose.
Well, not really. It's too long.
Right.
I mean, it's too long for a build. I mean, this company, as much as I give them crap for virtually everything they do, they can do a pay-per-view build, particularly as it pertains to Brock Lesnar. I just think that's way too long. It's not within their kind of like practice of doing things either. I think if we don't get it at Survivor Series, we'll see it very shortly thereafter, if not before. And yeah, it's going to be an absolutely fantastic match. Like, in answer to your first question, they might lean on the history of the fact that he works great against smaller opponents to build like the quality of the match, just in case people are disenfranchised after all that following the Kofi Kingston debacle. But in a way, I think Paul Heyman will have a neater way of building this, because he's so small. Like Rey Mysterio is so small that I think they'll work that into the storytelling somehow, and that will inform the actual power of every single Rey Mysterio comeback when the match itself does happen.
Do you think they'll link to the past that these two have with each other as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because the existing visuals are great. Like Brock decimated him once upon a time before.
The thing in my head is him, I think he's on a stretcher.
Yeah,
just
slams him against the post. The thing is with Rey as well, like Brock's got the history with the small guys, but Rey's got history with every big guy, and he almost
everyone's a big guy to him.
Yeah, like he almost always makes it work. So the chemistry seems natural, and it seems destined to be a success. I personally think that this is the year to split off. You can do the other triple threat dream matches if you're doing Raw or NXT SmackDown, but this is probably the year to steer away from doing it with the world champions. Talk about booking themselves into a corner at Hell in a Cell. It's an even bigger corner if you're asking The Fiend, Adam Cole and Brock Lesnar to face each other. How on earth you book yourself out of that jam? How on earth you don't make Adam Cole look even smaller than Rey, putting him next to Brock? That match helps nobody. So Brock versus Rey feels big. For the belt, feels big at the Survivor Series, allowing those two champions to do something else.
How do you see them developing the storyline with that tonight? Is it just going to be another murder of Dominic?
Potentially. They've gone to that well quite a bit.
I'm happy for them to go there again.
I've got a question for you. Why do you hate Dominic so much?
No, I just was gutted that at the WrestleMania we were at, we didn't see him get the life choked out of him by Samoa
That's
Joe.
not an answer to the question. That's a
visual I want to see.
Still on Infanticide or whatever it is. Like, what is it about this? Is it Dominic in particular?
I think I just wish I was Rey Mysterio's son. So
I don't know in particular how they're going to go about this. Like Dominic, they could kill him again. It's a fantastic visual. I would just like to see...
He probably's volunteering to be killed again.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I'd like to see them kind of move away. It's a lofty, ridiculous thought. Like, he's a firm part of the storyline and Ray's character arc, rather, going forward. But I just want to see... I'm a bit like you, except I don't like seeing defenseless, inexperienced offspring getting murdered. I'd like to see respected, incredible veterans get murdered. Like Rey Mysterio, the bumping he did for those Germans was just... chef's kiss for the Schadenfreude inclined. I thought he just looked great, like so vulnerable, giving absolutely all of himself to that gruesome, gruesome visual of the German suplex. Like, make me want Rey Mysterio to bring the fight to Brock Lesnar, leave Dominic out of it. That's not going to happen, but that's nonetheless what I would like to see.
I think this week as well, you could take advantage of something like the awkwardness of real life coming into play here. If Brock was to hunt down and find Ray and potentially have him captured, you make Kane try and make the save and then have Brock target Kane's dodgy knee. And
I think Kane's out of it for the time
being. Is he gone already? Is he?
I'm assuming the knee injury, from everything I've read, has ruled him out of any kind of physical activity.
It was great when injuries used to lead to injury angles. I really missed that because there's an easy one there. Like, they don't need to target.
They could have protected him.
Yeah, like it would have looked so much better for him to go out on this knee injury with like, well, I can't wait for Kane to come back and get his revenge, you know?
Is there not like several like mixed martial arts holds that target the knee?
100%.
Yeah.
Could they not have just done that?
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's a shame that they aren't just used. That's how it always used to be. A guy's injured. Great. That's an excuse to write him on TV and reheat his comeback. So Kane trying to make the save and failing, if he's even around, would be great. But Brock hunting in general, like, that's pretty exciting, isn't it? Like, Brock leaving stacks of bodies everywhere. Ray taking the F5 into the wall the other week. They got their energy back with making Brock a killer again. So this probably can't fail. Smash cut too. But yeah, this should be good.
Let's talk a little bit about NXT, because we were messaging over the weekend our adoration for SmackDown, a show that we didn't have a lot of expectations for, considering all the shambles with Saudi Arabia. How do you see that storyline playing on tonight? Could we see another NXT invasion?
I'd argue that we kind of have to, because I realise the reason why they invaded SmackDown, and that's because Vince banded off his entire roster at the mercy of a murderous dictator. But ultimately, given that NXT was always in the plans before that to like be part of Survivor Series this year, whatever plan they had, they need to accelerate it and do it on Raw, because like that roster doesn't need any help in looking like geeks that no one cares about. So can you imagine, like, days after they invade SmackDown, make a huge song and dance over it, they just leave Raw well alone, because who cares? I think for storyline's sake, they kind of have to do this, otherwise they look like people not worth attacking. And what does that say, big picture?
My worry is that with all of this NXT storyline is that now they're going to be booking a show with more than 3 hours planning. Like, that's them operating at peak pro wrestling company, is when they have no time and no stars and they have to actually try and book a wrestling show. My worry is that there'll have been a weekend's worth of creative spent that Vince McMahon red pens when he gets to Raw today, that just sees Tommaso Ciampa atoning for being allowed to beat The Miz by getting beaten down by, I don't know, pick a guy, Humberto Carrillo, somebody like that. Like, as Cedric points out, like, it's been a controlled experiment almost to turn Raw into the B show since SmackDown moved to Fox. And yeah, NXT do have to dominate. I sense that they won't attack in such great numbers because there's other issues to address on Raw, and you've got time, and you almost don't want to blow that. You've got 3 weeks left of the Survivor Series, and you don't want a situation like last year where Becky Lynch is getting injured on the go home, but you do want an angle as exciting as that. You want everybody to be as hyped, like, right at the very end of this. If you just do all these Under Siege segments now, and then you've got to do 3 weeks of, they better not show up again, we're ready from this time, it feels really stoic and dull. So I'd quite like them to stagger it a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 appearances, maybe like, they're now like the roster being put on notice sort of thing from NXT, because really after that, like, where else can you go? If you just do 2 weeks and 2 beatdowns, where next?
We're going to be talking about this NXT invasion in a lot more detail in another podcast that's set to come out today. But in terms of like people leading the charge, obviously we saw Adam Cole defending his championship on SmackDown. We saw, as you mentioned, Tommaso Ciampa defeating The Miz. I'd like to see more emphasis on Shayna Baszler. I know we already saw that, but if she could take out, she could talk out Nikki Cross and Sasha Banks, but if she could take out Bayley and then tonight take out Becky Lynch, that would really make a statement.
That match is built in, isn't it? You're good
That's
to go.
the triple threat you want. I know we're saying that maybe you shouldn't do a triple threat for all of them, but that, Becky, Bayley and Baszler.
I think it's almost imperative that Shayna Baszler targets Becky Lynch, because like they just work so wonderfully in like sort of contrast. One's the undisputed man, marketed as the man of the main roster women's division. The other one, quietly, has had a way more impressive title reign, a much longer title reign, is a more legitimate killer. It would just be a lovely visual and hopefully match. Just a great dynamic that they should explore very quickly. Otherwise, Shayna looks a bit selective when realistically she is in character the ultimate doyen of that division.
They even have nice storyline, ties together. It was last year, Becky was blooded, putting a chair in Ronda Rousey's ribs. Another horsewoman. Like there's Shayna there now. The sort of embodiment of that MMA horsewoman, that entire aesthetic that Ronda has no longer there for. Shayna's perfect to slot straight in against Becky.
From Becky Lynch, let's transfer over to Seth Rollins.
Yeah. Good segue though.
Yes. What is the future for him? Because I enjoyed the Fiend capturing that Universal Championship on Crown Jewel, but all I could think of was what happens now.
I mean, I don't want to be cruel to Seth Rollins. I genuinely think that he's struggling to cope with the pressure of being both the top star of the company, its PR face. He's a significantly better wrestler than the current perception has it. I don't think he's that much better, but regardless, it feels a bit like he's asking for the abuse, maybe getting too much of it, if that makes sense. But ultimately, after all that, I just don't care. I don't care. He's not turning himself babyface. He's not being booked at all as an effective babyface. It's just a convergence of all these factors that just make me completely disinterested in his character arc.
All the more reason why I think the answer to your question is time off. Time off from the character for the fans. Time off for Seth Rollins, who has been worked through WWE's manipulation of its talent to say you must always go. In 2015, he injured his knee because he wrestled something like 170 matches that year. As WWE champion, he believed that was his responsibility. He's come back. It's very visible the damage that this has done with mental health, and and all flippancy aside, his Twitter game and his public perception speaks to a man that is stressed within his job, working incredibly hard. That physical schedule, that taxing schedule, just traveling from town to town.
You lash out when you're anxious and depressed.
Yeah, he's got an opportunity here which would benefit his character as well as his real life self to just disappear a little bit. Nothing helps wrestlers more in WWE than not being on WWE television. This could be perfect for him to disappear, to get that pop when he returns. I know it's WWE, so what could be 2 months will really be 2 weeks, but of all the times to just not be around at the moment, I would say now is perfect.
I was going to say, well, is it best for him to just not appear from now on, or would he be better served putting an NXT star over, whether that be, I can't remember who first suggested it in the office, but I've fallen in love with Adam Cole versus Seth Rollins at Survivor Series.
That might really see him off. If in fact the plan is to somehow keep him afloat as a babyface, putting him against the most popular call and response guy that NXT has, that'll just see him off as a babyface. So that should only happen, in my opinion, if he's going to turn heel in the future. And really, that's the only sort of option at this point, is it not?
I think so. I feel like if they just did it right now, it would be. It's almost like I think he would struggle with it, because I don't think he's over to any degree. I know he's getting booed, but I don't think it's the right kind of heat for a heel turn right now. I think people are genuinely sick of Seth Rollins, and I have sympathy for him in that regard, because I don't think all of that's his fault. So I just think even if you pull the
some of it is.
If you pull the and this is the other thing about Seth Rollins, Adam Cole. I tried really hard over the year not to subscribe to the idea that Seth Rollins ruins things, but I'm starting to buy in. And the last thing I want is for Adam Cole's main roster pay-per-view bow to be ruined because Seth Rollins has got the anti-chemistry with everybody. So I just maybe that's just me, but I just sense him being as far away from all of this as possible benefits everybody.
Speaking of Crown Jewel fallout, the OC are now the best tag team in the world.
They lost to the Street Profits on the last episode of Raw.
Best tag team in the world. Of course, defeating the Viking Raiders, handing them their first loss seemingly in forever. Do you think this leads in tonight's show into? It's intriguing now because you have this set up for a potential challenger for the Raw tag team titles that the Viking Raiders hold. But as you always complain about, with Survivor Series around, does that kind of have to be put on the back burner?
I bloody hope not. I've spent 32 minutes of my life, ultimately being asked to take the OC, who've been beaten like a drum for months at this point, as tag team title contenders. If they don't give me that match, I won't do anything, but I'll be mildly upset in a sort of numb, detached way.
We are 1-1 so far with Saudi Arabian trophies being featured. That one that was as tall as Braun never came back, like along with his green belt. That probably sits in like some sort of consulate, like lovely display counter or something like that. Shane McMahon turned his into quite a fun heel turn. So I think, like, I'd rather the OC go the way of Braun, to be honest. I also feel resentful that I wasted 32 minutes to that tag team turmoil match, but something tells me this goes absolutely nowhere. It was a visual for the OC to have belts and trophies on the night. Despite AJ Styles' best efforts to babyface Vince McMahon and say it was a problem with the airplane's fuel or whatever it was, I don't think this is going to contribute to some grand OC push.
That absolutely was not the case.
100% that one. Like, that was one for the Good Brothers, but I don't think it's going to like impact their push or anything.
If I'm being kind, like, they've got a little bit of banter, the OC. They could potentially make something like quite amusing out of this. Potentially, I guess, if it's considered canon and is featured in storylines going forward, they could potentially like extract some amusing material out of the fact that they are the best tag team in the world.
And they could,
if I'm being kind.
And as much as we criticise the way that they've been handled on the main roster, they could, on paper, put together a fantastic match against the Viking Raiders if they.
We've already seen a 2 3/4 star match with them. I've got no real faith in this dynamic. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know what Michael Hamflett thinks.
I don't know what's next for the Viking Raiders. Truthfully, I'm really pleased.
AOP, surely.
Well, that's the big match, isn't
so
it?
This
but
could
like
be the stepping stone.
Yeah, this is it. They do need stepping stone teams, but like I suppose in that regard, I'm with Sidgwick because I can't get excited about stepping stone teams, and I can't really get excited about Gallows and Anderson as a team. I think they're just about passable alongside AJ Styles because they're quite funny, but the matches don't exactly make me feel thrilled by it or anything. So unless they go the Shane McMahon route and just steer into this best in the world nonsense, I don't think there's a last past Survivor Series.
Speaking of title contenders, very briefly, who should be the next contender for the Raw Women's Championship, do you think?
If I'm being truthful, I can't remember who's on the roster. They've botched this draft so disastrously
just
for me.
Charlotte just crying out, and yet you can't.
You can't do Charlotte again. You absolutely can't do it. You just can't do it. So who's left on Raw?
I honestly can't remember. I
It's
feel like they loaded the SmackDown roster up, obviously, for Fox. But I feel like when we talked about this, it was Becky and Charlotte carrying the load for a bunch of up and comers, and yet it already feels like we have to go back to Charlotte. The Survivor Series provides a welcome distraction from this potential problem.
Yes.
Let's talk instead then about Rusev, Lashley, and Lana. A thing that, let's be honest, we buried for the first few weeks, and right up until possibly last week, did we think this is absolute nonsense and it's not going to go anywhere? And it is still absolutely
of course
preposterous. But, last week's it was main event of last week because it was incredibly entertaining. Obviously, Rusev ended up laying down, grabbing his bollocks. But we had a wonderful moment in Crown Jewel. One of my favourite moments with Rusev fighting off all the members of Team Flair and eventually finally getting his hands on Bobby Lashley. No sort of definitive conclusion to that. How does this saga continue tonight?
It's the weirdest thing because it's absolutely not remotely funny, but you kind of have to have a sense of humour to go alongside it
If this
to
wasn't
make it
Rusev,
work.
It wouldn't work, would it?
No, not at all. I'm finally glad that it's actually become kind of a platform for his talents rather than just a way to just inexplicably bury him. They might have rescued something, and I'm talking purely on so bad it's good terms, from this really bizarre, unflattering storyline. Yeah, I mean, just give us the match already at this point. I think it's been built long enough. Do we need another soap opera twist? Was Rusev cheating all along?
It's the WhatCulture content banter seesaw of WWE, isn't it? The content does millions and millions of views on YouTube. The banter chases viewers off on television. So they're not going to bother putting faith in it to put it in a main event segment anymore. But they'll come up with something that generates a really impressive thumbnail to get those millions again. Last week, Rusev forced the wedding ring down Bobby Lashley's throat. Maybe there'll be an X-ray of it this week. Like that time, was it Ryan Dunn shoved a car up his arse in Jackass? And then Rusev can deck him in the hospital or something like that. Just like something that makes a ridiculous... What was it last week? Were they necking on over Rusev's body?
Yeah.
For the
Yes.
thumb? Something that creates a visual like that to get millions of hits on YouTube because that's how this storyline generates.
Dr. Heine 2.
Yeah. There
Dr. Heine 2 up Rusev's arse.
A local medical facility.
When you suggested that of just get to the match already, my mind immediately went to the Viagra on a pole match, which was, I think, in WCW.
Where else would it be?
Yes.
You know, like when
It's either that or TNA, and I wasn't 100% sure.
when Steve Austin was dressed as a doctor, he's like, "I'll take it from here, nurse." Like Lashley's asked, "Sorry, can you just clench, please?" He said, "What's that?" Matchka. And then he clenches, and then like Russo pulls off the mask and he attacks, and just something daft for the visual, for the content for YouTube. And I'm game for it. I am fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with it.
I couldn't have asked for anything better than that. I'm weirdly, really excited for Raw tonight, more than just Brock Lesnar's return.
We haven't addressed the fact that we could see a significant amount of release requests. There could be lots of turmoil backstage. We might see like Vince McMahon's customary like piss off pal punishments for those who've been the most vocal in their complaints on social media.
Buddy Murphy, then.
Buddy Murphy, Harper, Revival. We could be in for some ugly but perversely entertaining stuff tonight. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Some non-literal bloodletting.
Yes, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, I can't wait for that. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. And watch there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. And as I said, you can follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. This has been the Raw preview. Enjoy Raw tonight. We will be reviewing it tomorrow as a podcast. So make sure you join us for that. But for now, my thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.